Welcome everybody to the Daily Space Weather. I'm your host Dan, aka smAsho. We're starting things out today looking at the sun in 304 angstroms. We see that filament in the southeast has collapsed back onto the photosphere, we think. Perhaps landing on the far side of the sun out toward stereo A instead of toward Earth. Filaments also collapsed on the northwest limb. And lots of stuff to cover, so let's get into data. First, head to helioviewer.org to check out the fields. And Sunspot 2766 has degraded. Now an alpha class sunspot, as I only see one umbra this morning. Here's the fade to 304 angstroms. And there's the latest situation with that filament as it continues to appear to collapse. We don't see any coronal mass ejections or anything like that. A little bit of ejecta coming out, but nothing that you would really call any sort of an event. Next, look at the real-time solar wind to see that it's been all the way up to 525 plus kilometers per second there. Looks like 530 was about the max. Coming down a little bit off that high. And we're expecting this to last a while. We could easily get into geomagnetic unrest or perhaps KP5 geomagnetic storm conditions. Current density 8.32 protons per cubic centimeter. Current solar wind speed just coming off of 500 down to 493 kilometers a second. There's the KP index over the past 3 days. And here's the geospace magnetosphere movies. We're going to show all three today. As we see some high velocity areas in the top panes. So there's 4 hours of data on velocity. We'll also look at density and pressure today. There's density. And you can see the very high density geomagnetic regions there around the Earth showing up as dark blue areas, low density showing up as white areas. And we're talking about the density in protons per cubic centimeter. Literally looking at Earth's geomagnetic shield right here. And lastly, the pressure. There's the pressure. Again, 4 hours of data courtesy University of Michigan. And you can see that high pressure, that boxy looking appearance there on the equatorial plane as well. The left pane there looking a little odd. Some 90-degree angles showing up there. Next we'll look at ground magnetic perturbations, first at the poles. And we see some stronger aurora borealis and australis generated from this incoming solar wind stream. Welcome to the coronal hole wind stream. It's pretty high speed. And you can see that spiral appearance there at the poles. No surprise there, as the field-aligned currents strike the magnetosphere at the pole. So here's the full globe view. And you can see evidence of the South Pole having crept into the southern Indian Ocean. And you can see some indication of both north geomagnetic poles, the one over Canada and the one over Siberia. Here's the current 30-minute aurora forecast. And allow me to vanish. So here you should see some stronger auroras kicking up there, especially in the southern hemisphere, it looks like. And let us know if you get any aurora photos. We'll be more than happy to show them on the channel. By the way, thanks to our patrons, the real source of funding for the content. Please consider becoming a patron and increase the probability that these videos will continue to exist, be publicly visible, and be free for all to view. As the likelihood drops and our funding evaporates before your very eyes, the likelihood of these videos continuing to exist gets lower and lower. We're also on Subscribestar and on PayPal, so please visit the links below the video and support the channel. More on that later. By the way, if you're watching on YouTube, please don't forget to press and like and subscribe over there. Give us a like and a subscribe over at BitChute as well. Check out our links. Perhaps check out yesterday's video with Eugene Bagashov. Shout out to Eugene. There's the BitChute channel as well. Thanks everybody viewing over there as we get hundreds more views. And welcome to the daily smashlights section, where we talk about whatever we want. Whether it's talking about Mansa, making America not suck again, or Mensa, making Earth not suck again. We've got all kinds of spooky, scary things to talk about. So let's go. Let's just dive deep into it. Deep into the world of smashlights. Part of the daily space weather. If you want to go watch a bike race today, there's one happening in Royersford, Pennsylvania. It will require riders to wear masks while racing. Shout out to Colleen. And I won't be able to make it down to the race today as I'll be doing a group ride in an undisclosed, secret, clandestine location, like ninjas. Anyway, there are the categories for the racing. And hopefully they'll get a good turnout and everybody will show up for their fields and it will be a delight. That racing brought to you by Pickle Juice. Now let's talk about affiliations. We are setting up an Amazon affiliate account, so look for stuff to come out there soon. We're going to be putting links to items that we're considering purchasing or have purchased, and perhaps you should too. Now let's talk about some really scary stuff. OMG, oh my God. It's the COVID. Holy criminy. Well, I have one thing to say about the COVID, and it's for you can. By the way, if you're watching the content live, please leave us a comment. Before we get into the spooky, scary world of COVID, oh my God, there are so many cases. Let's talk about happy hypoxia, which is a condition that you may experience, especially if you're going out walking down the street on a hot day by yourself wearing a mask. By the way, that's insane. And if you're one of these Karens or Chads who's virtue signaling other people who are walking down the street by themselves wearing a mask, please stop. Now, this is a baffling condition to physicians. While a pulse oximeter is remarkably accurate when oxygen readings are high, it markedly exaggerates the severity of low oxygen when readings are low, says Dr. Tobin. Another factor is how the brain responds to low levels of oxygen. As oxygen levels drop, in patients with COVID-19, the brain does not respond until oxygen falls to very low levels, at which point a patient typically becomes short of breath. So this is kind of odd, as they're not seeing dyspnea at the same time as seeing low blood oxygen levels, perhaps some sort of previously unknown feature to COVID-19, the condition caused by the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which is still, by the way, not scary in the slightest. It wasn't scary on January 22nd, the day before we started covering it on smashomash.com/forum. Let's talk about pro driving tips. One pro driving tip is don't drive the wrong way on a major highway and crash head-on into an ambulance. It could kill you, like it did this driver. Whoever it might be, I'm not sure, but somebody caused some death and destruction here by having a head-on collision with an ambulance. Sadly, the ambulance crew probably needed an ambulance crew after having suffered a head-on collision on Route 33. Another thing not to do while driving is fire guns out of the windows of the car. Somebody reported tracer rounds being fired along West Hill Road, Lower Milford Township. That's not fireworks, folks. That's 9mm handguns. Most likely. I guess it could have been an MP5, who knows. Let's talk about COVID tests. I've put up a clarification on our Instagram page, and I'd like to invite all of our daily space weather viewers, friends, foes, and neutrals to follow me on Instagram. There's exclusive content there, such as this clarification. A COVID test positive does not mean you're sick. Most cases appear to be asymptomatic, and asymptomatic people aren't sick. Why am I even still responding to propaganda? What a joke of spin and cherry-picked nonsense data. COVID. Still not scary in the least. So for God's sakes, get a grip. All right, now let's talk about Matt Taibbi. The corporate-sponsored revolution. Oh, that's right. Have you noticed propaganda coming out of big tech organizations and practically all corporations, and a weird leftist bent to everything, and a bunch of confused people who think that the U.S. is an evil racist country, and yada, yada, yada. The people who run this country have run out of workable myths with which to distract the public, and in a moment of extreme crisis, people are getting a little bit pissed off, if you've noticed. Are they trying to stoke a civil war on purpose? Is it some sort of a battle of black versus white? Is it the haves versus the have-nots? Or is it just a bunch of propaganda? Leave us a comment and let us know what's going on in your neighborhood. The best explanation of these sudden reversals in rhetoric is that Trump broke the brains of America's educated classes, like Russian aristocrats who spent the last days of the Tsarist Empire flocking to fortune tellers and mystics. Upscale blue staters have lost themselves lately in quasi-religious tracts like white fragility and are lining up to flog themselves for personal and historical sins. Is it time to make a change? Is it a change of your government and who's running all of the corporations that are spewing propaganda all over the internet? Well, it might be. Here's a clip from our Terms Define Socialism Part 2, once again featuring special guest Eugene Bagashov. There's got to be more. The idea that the word, the whole thing, the word socialism. Anyway, if you haven't watched that video, we shot it yesterday. Terms Define Socialism 2, featuring Eugene Bagashov, our favorite Belarusian particle physicist and philosopher. Also, I'm inviting everybody to head over to smashomash.com/forum. And I see a bunch of people have been putting up posts there, and we thank you. Amanhotep, Kimberly, etc. Cheers. Go over there and set up a login and contribute if you want to talk about things like fast radio bursts, Gobekli Tepe, Covidiots, Comet Swan, etc. Let's talk about government. As one useless man is a shame, 2 is a law firm, and 3 is a Congress. I like that comment by John Adams. Sounds like he's seen some utterly useless government bureaucrats. What say you? Have you seen some yourself? Have you seen a bunch of people who are making America suck instead of America not suck? Have you noticed that? Well, anyway, it's up to you to make America not suck again. Or perhaps if you're not in America, you can Mensa instead of Mansa. Yeah, use it as a verb. Make Earth not suck again. How about that? By the way, we're going to be making merch and just been too busy to order the products. We're not sure if we're going to make a shirt like this showing massive radio galaxy Cygnus A, otherwise known as 3C405, or if we're going to make one like this that says, "I've survived a global pandemic so far." And here ends today's Smash Lights segment. Thanks for tuning in to Smash Lights and to the Daily Space Weather. We're going to shut down Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor now, as we've got lots more things to talk about. So let's get to it. And I've reappeared, and that's better. All right. I apologize for that temporary aside. Now, yesterday I called Comet Neowise Comet Atlas. I apologize for that. It's actually Comet Atlas, which is now becoming visible to the naked eye. Have a look near the horizon. Let's talk about more data. I just wanted to zoom in on last solar minimum's radio flux. So if you look at the last solar minimum, you can see the radio flux right here. There you go. There's the 10.7 centimeter radio flux at the last solar minimum. And here's the 10.7 centimeter radio flux at this solar minimum. Anyway, current values are at 70 solar flux units. We're looking at the Space Weather Enthusiast dashboard here, which has changed the sort of changed the format here on all this stuff. Let me just hit refresh to show you what it looks like without being altered. And there you can see the entire cycle 24 radio flux and sunspot number. GOES X-ray flux is still fairly flatlined here. We don't see any significant X-ray flaring. We don't see any significant proton events, as there have been no big Earth-directed coronal mass ejections. Here's a very spiky set of magnetometer data from the GOES 16. And you can see these extreme spikes here. That's associated with the incoming coronal hole wind stream, as well as more direct solar magnetism. And you can see that here on the Gong 2 information. Here's a top view ecliptic plane field plot. And this area over here has got a bunch of magnetic activity kicking off. And we see some activity likely south of the solar equator out here as well. So some interesting stuff to look at here. And we're expecting to continue to see spiky GOES magnetometer data throughout the day. Probably some weak readings, actually, coming in later, consistent with what we see now. And will remain in the North Pole current sheet shown here in green for the foreseeable future, at least the next 36 hours or so, assuming nothing suddenly changes. And by the way, it can. This data is 1 hour and 19 minutes old. Here's another view of the magnetic environment here. And this one shows the B field, which is the interplanetary magnetic field, the one on which you live in blue. And you see one big drag of that kind of at the moment that Sunspot briefly appeared down here in the south. And we won't get into the magnetohydrodynamics, but anyway, there's some data on that. Again, keep in mind the magnetic environment can change with no warning. Next, looking at the view from stereo A to show you no coronal mass ejections. And here's the view from SOHO's coronagraph. This is between the Earth and Sun. Stereo A is out behind the Earth, orbitally speaking, as it gets to see space weather before the Earth does, hence being called stereo A for ahead. Nothing exciting there on the LASCO C2. See if we see anything interesting on the LASCO C3. And again, we are streaming live to Twitch. If you haven't checked us out over there, please subscribe over at twitch.tv/smAshomash, as it's the place where the streaming is great. And you get to see great things happen as they happen. Like, for instance, here's where planets are in the solar system. We're viewing at theplanetstoday.com. There's a bit of a pile-up happening right now. As you can probably see, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, Neptune, and Uranus are all on one side of the sun. So view our daily space weather videos and understand the distinction between Uranus and a hole in the ground and a black hole. A fictional creation of math in search of observations. Next, looking at a sky chart here. It's in-the-sky.org. And again, we've got a massive pileup. We've got Jupiter and Saturn and Mars, and the moon has just set. Venus and Mercury rising before the sun. If you've got a low horizon, go check out those objects. And check out the electron flux. It's ultra low. It's tangentially dropped down to incredibly flatline levels here for the last couple of months. And we're not going to see this rise up today. In fact, we're going to see this crater again. We're going to see very low, flatlined, below the margin of being able to measure type levels out of the GOES electron flux from that incoming coronal hole wind stream. It's what you'd call proton light. And I won't get into the physics of it today because there's too much stuff to cover. And we see major electronic anomalies down here over the Antarctic continent, the southern Atlantic Ocean, south of the Cape of Good Hope. So there you can see a major electronic event in there. If you would have been there, your GPS would have been off by hundreds of meters. Also some smaller anomalies over the Caribbean, Central America, and Mexico. And the South Pacific a little bit. Here's one layer. Now that last image, that last movie was the entire air column, thermosphere, all the way down to the ionosphere. Here's just the ionosphere, and it's quite anomalous as well, as we've got an influx of all kinds of different energy types. Here's the latest image, and it's looking quite anomalous here. It's charged up on the night side. It's anomalous and blobby on the daytime side. That image from 10:15 UT, and we're coming at you late today. By the way, we saw an earthquake on the south flank of the Kilauea volcano, as well as one south of the Aleutian Island chain in an ocean rift zone. Looks like a bunch of magmatic activity. No tsunamis have been warned about. And the largest quake of the past 24 was actually this 5.5 south of the Aleutian Islands. Let's go over the past 24 hours as we see basically a lull here in earthquakes. Here's an interesting one at Prattville, California, at an altitude of, at a depth of negative 1900 meters. So somehow we had an earthquake 1900 meters above sea level over Lake Almanor. That sounds like all manure to me. How could an earthquake have happened 1900 meters above sea level in a flat place with a lake? Your guess is as good as mine. Anyway, so some quakes striking there at Hawaii also. Here's some nearly 100-kilometer deep quakes. One on the Alaskan mainland. A 4.9 in Indonesia, just at about 100 kilometers depth. Here's a Filipino quake. That one coming in at 2021 yesterday. A deep quake at Tajikistan. A very deep quake at Fiji at nearly 500 kilometers depth. It's a 4.4 magnitude. And let's move on to volcanoes. A little bit of a lull in volcanic activity. It looks like the Kono's exploding though. Flight level 6,000 there. Popocatépetl, no volcanic ash observed in satellite. Please don't pitch a tent at the base of Popocatépetl. You could become the part of the Earth by getting buried in a pyroclastic flow. Revenador is exploding, flight level 14,000 there, and Sabancaya exploding, flight level 24,000 there. Please do not attempt to fly a hang glider over the caldera of Sabancaya. It could be unhealthful. Here's windy.com's pressure maps. We'll let this advance via the GFS forecast into tomorrow to attempt to show our viewers where pressure zones are and aren't. There's where things will be at noon tomorrow according to the GFS forecast. Windy.com, they've got a great mobile app. If you haven't checked it out, download it for your smartphone. It's totally free. Next, looking at lightningmaps.org. We've put in the day-night terminator here. Lightningmaps.org, next time you hear thunder, perhaps check that out. And let's zoom in on this spot as we see some significant lightning striking around Texarkana. So if you're in Texarkana, get out and head south and look south and west. You may be able to see sprites. And you can also use lightningmaps.org to forecast thunder. Hey, Dangerfield. Hey, Pittsburgh. Hey, Mount Pleasant. There's thunder rolling in. How do I know? From lightningmaps.org. Blitzortung.org is the German version of the same thing. Here's the water vapor map for Europe and Africa. Evidence of that Saharan dust there going across the Atlantic Ocean. Water vapor maps for the Far East and Oceania. Here's a map of the cloud cover of the U.S. We don't use visible at nighttime. It's too dark to see most of the cloud cover here, so we use the NASA GOES shortwave satellite. And you can see some rapid cloud nucleation happening there around the Texas-Louisiana border, near the southwest corner of Arkansas. Here's a water vapor map for the Americas. And here's one for the U.S. And we're going to zoom in on that area in the southwest corner of Arkansas real quick. For all you weather pornographers, I guess we're going to get a little bit cooler weather here in Pennsylvania today, according to the way the jet stream looks. A little respite from the extreme heat. And I didn't realize that thing had started back up again. All right. Anyway, there's that area of thunder, lightning, and storms in East Texas. Shout out to my Texan viewers. And there you can see that band of fairly strong storms. Let's zoom in for once. We don't always zoom in. I'm not always the most interesting man in the world, but I do drink Dos Equis. All right. And anyway, thanks Smash Team for tuning into the Daily Space Weather. Please don't forget to share on your social media. Tell your friends, tell your foes, tell your science noobs, and tell your science pros. Thanks for flying American Smashways. And now that I've vanished, I would like to warn you to keep your head and arms inside the Smash plane at all times. Go check out our playlists. We've got hundreds of videos that may or may not be relevant on this date. Here are our bonus features. It's a look at the ombre associated with Sunspot 2766, and now there's only one, indicating that it is now alpha class. So Sunspot 2766 degraded since yesterday, where we saw 2 ombre, now only 1. Here are the magnetic fields, and you can see that no longer beta class because the North Pole polarity umbra has disappeared. So there's the full view. Let's take one more look at things here in 48 hours. It's the 48-hour 94 angstroms view courtesy of the SDO. Thanks for tuning in. Remember, stare at the sun, don't drink, don't be a COVIDiot, and certainly don't drive if you do drink. And since it'll never be now again, welcome to Neo-Renaissance. May that solar wind be at your back. See ya.